Welcome to the Sheff United Way. My name is Hal, and we are going to talk about Tyrese Campbell becoming Sheffield United's 8th summer signing, and it feels like I've done 800 videos on players, rumoured players, and actually when the deal's officially gone through, as this one has, joining Sheffield United on a 3-year deal. Should we be excited? Well, let's get the views of a Stoke City fan that has watched him week in, week out. It is George, who I'm delighted to welcome from Potterlytics. Have I pronounced that correctly, George?
You have, yes. Well done. You've got the awful pun out there.
So it's like analytics, but for Stoke.
That's exactly right, yeah, for the Potters.
I love it. Now, I have got a little soft spot for Stoke City. I lived in Staffordshire for 3 years, and I thought it was just a wonderful time of my life. I think that you probably agree with this. For people that don't know Stoke, it can get a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah, definitely. It's similar to a lot of industrial towns and cities up and across the north. It gets that kind of bad rap, but I've had nothing but friendly people since I've been living here, so...
Absolutely. That is exactly myself and Nick, who we also do this channel. We went and did a vlog on an away day at Stoke. I remember we were walking around looking a little bit lost, and the amount of people that came up to us and were like, "Oh, do you need any help? Do you know where you're going?" It was just, I kept saying to him, "See, everyone here is lovely." Anyway, let's find out if Tyrese Campbell is going to be one after this video that we're all saying, "Oh, I feel great. This is exciting," and a lovely warm feeling, because Tyrese Campbell, 24 years old, he'll be 25 in December. He is 6 foot, but apart from that, my research is fairly limited. So, George, tell me about him.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, you might get some varied views from Stoke fans, but I'm firmly on the side of the debate that Tyrese Campbell's going to be a real player. I think you're getting him now, as you say, 24, into that period in his career where he really does need to start cementing his place in the first team. And he needs to start showing some of that potential that we have seen from him, and we've seen a lot of it, a little bit more consistently. And hopefully for him, Sheffield United is the place to do it. I'm disappointed that it's not Stoke. I've been a big fan of his since he kind of burst onto the scene just before COVID, back in the heady days where we thought we could walk over the Championship. But yeah, fantastic footballer, quick, confident on the ball, a quality finisher.
Is he?
I'm sure the highlights reels may have showed you, particularly sort of those edge of the box chances where he's cutting inside and whipping it into the far corner. Really exciting footballer from my point of view.
So you mentioned the finishing there. I'm looking at his goal return, and it wouldn't instantly strike me as striker who's going to score a lot of goals. So are you saying that, like, when he does finish, it's a good finish?
Yeah, very much so. I think that, like I say, that kind of specialism of cutting inside and whipping it far corner, there's a lot of quality finishes in there. He's had his trouble with injuries. When he first broke onto the scene, I think it was 2019-20, possibly 2020-21 under Michael O'Neill. He had an incredible run of finishing, particularly through the COVID season. And then unfortunately had a major injury for about 12 months that kept him out of a team. But sorry, dog going off there.
Dog's excited about this move as well for the Blades. This is great to hear.
So.
We're all getting involved.
Yeah, but a fantastic finisher when he's on it. He's had a couple of really good purple patches, but never quite translated that into a consistent season. I'm sure many of you might know that Stoke has been a bit of a kind of murder ground for strikers to come here. We've taken plenty of 20-goal-a-season players and turned them into 5 or 6-goal-a-season players, but Tyrese Campbell, despite his injuries, come through pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, he's a striker who can play on the wing, and that could be useful with Sheffield United now playing this kind of wing formation, which we haven't seen for a long, long time. Is he predominantly a left-footer?
Yes, very predominantly left-footed. He's got a good finish on his right as well. I think for most Stoke fans, we'd kind of be convinced that coming in off the right is probably the best for him, but okay. One of his best spells of form under Alex Neil was coming in from the left, so a little bit on both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I had a little look at some of the positions that he has played. Centre forward, right wing, left wing, second striker, and he's even played a few times as an attacking midfielder. So go on then, colours to the mast. Where do you think he's going to play for Sheffield United?
I think he's more of a winger. I think
Okay.
he's more the kind of player you want picking up the ball deep and running at players. Even kind of those games he did play as a striker for Stoke, that's more of what you got. He would drop off the front line, he would pick the ball up from deep, and he would run at defences. He can play on the shoulder as well. He's very quick at getting in behind, but probably in the build-up, you're more likely to see him for Sheffield United, where presumably you'll be dominating more of the ball. He'll be dropping off. He'll be running at players. He'll be trying to break those lines.
I mean, how do you feel losing a player like this who's 24, as you've mentioned, that's the prime really of his career, and you actually ended up with a tribunal fee paying quite a bit of money for him, and you've lost him for nothing?
Yeah, I think it's disappointing from my side. There's been a lot of kind of difficult conversations within the fan base about whether some people believe he's kind of at his best at Stoke. He's had a bit of stick from the stands as well on occasions, particularly at the end of last season, but then came into his own in the last 3 or 4 games. Personally, I'm really disappointed. I would have liked to see him stay. I think he's a really talented player, but you can also see the argument that probably for his career at this point, it's best to find a little bit more of a more stable sort of stomping ground for him to carry on his career at.
You mentioned injuries. Are we saying this is a player who's been unlucky and has had varied injuries, or is he injury prone?
I would say it's difficult to say really without knowing too much of the medical stuff, but I would say probably more unlucky. He's had one major injury which kept him out for 12, 14 months, something along those lines. And he's had a couple of niggling injuries that have come in since then that have kept him out for little bits at a time. But again, also changes in manager have kept him out of the squad. Sort of new players coming in has kept him out as well. So he's never really quite had the full run of form that he's maybe needed.
A lot of players need that. If he's a confidence player, of course, we'll slowly discover if he is. The wonderful website, roysviewfrom.com, check it out, has taken the opinions of Potter's fans and collated them, and I picked out a few of these quotes. I'm going to read a few of them and then get your thoughts. So here's one, and these aren't names attached to them, but he was disrupted by injuries a fair bit. If he's fit and ready to go, he'll be a handful. His time here can only, in my opinion, be looked at as a failure. With the potential he had, and still probably has, he should have had a 15-plus league goals at this level twice by now, or be doing well in the Premier League. I still think he could do that, but I don't think he'd ever do it here being Stoke. Also, that's a failure on him and the club. And here's the final one before I get your opinion. This is quite a harsh quote. Lazy git. He would only turn up at the end of the season when sniffing around for a new contract. Glad we got rid. Thoughts?
I will fairly severely disagree with the last one. I think I'm not really sure that's based on anything other than he had a pretty decent end to last season, played fairly well towards the end. The laziness thing has followed him around. I think that's probably much more of a sort of descriptor of his style. He's an attacker who he's not going to be kind of we would say someone like Jacob Brown or John Walters for Stoke that's going to be bombing around the pitch, constantly pressing. But he's not a lazy player at all. He's a player who brings it in sprints, who brings it in quality moments of attacking. But I think probably more comes from that style of waiting for the ball, waiting for the right moment to get going and run at people. In terms of it being a failure, I would say it's quite a harsh way to put it, but certainly when he came bursting onto the scene, you would have expected that Campbell would have been somewhere much higher up than he is at the minute. I would have expected that move to a Premier League club from 2020. I would have expected that probably much sooner than it seems to be coming. So maybe not a failure, given the changes in managers, given how much turmoil Stoke City have been in the past 6 years. It's quite a difficult place to really shine. But certainly, we might have expected a bit more to come of his career so far. Hopefully, like I say, this is the place he can do it.
Yeah, he's got a 3-year contract. He'll be at a Premier League club, therefore, next season. It's interesting, isn't it, with the goal return? He's never got into double figures in a season. And I'll just read some more quotes that might kind of allude to that. So Darren is a good friend of mine and a Stoke fan, said, not the same since injury, went on form, a good finisher and prefers a central role, which you sort of disagreed with. Went on his game, a good finisher, though, needs to be involved and not drift. Recently not scored as expected. Will not be a huge miss for Stoke City.
Yeah, again, it kind of shows this dichotomy in Stoke fans. I think it's very 50-50 with Campbell. It's very much that he's not a big miss. He's flattered to deceive. He's not quite had the career that we expected. And there's another side of it that's much more on the other side. That he's an exciting player. He's just not quite had the breaks of it yet. He's just not had his proper full... Apologies, the dog's agreeing with me again there. He's not quite had his full 12 months of, dominating the league, of playing 40, 46 games, however many he could get up through the league to show really what he's all about. And he's never quite had the consistency in management, the consistency in backroom staff to get that out there.
If you were to highlight his key attributes, what would you say they are?
Really confident running at people, really quality in just finding that little half space to either get the ball into the box or get a shot away, and really confident drifting off the back line, picking up the ball and running, and really good at running in behind as well. I think the finishing is difficult. As you say, his goal-scoring record, to me, underestimates or underrepresents how good his finishing has been.
And what about his weaknesses?
Most likely you're looking at in the air, not particularly great. I think one of the issues that Stoke fans picked up on, and in my view didn't correctly attribute as lazy, but that's what they were seeing it as, was that he's not going to challenge much in the air. Generally, he's going to sort of walk back onto a defender and kind of try and put them off balance more so than he's going to be jumping up and winning aerial duels for you. He is good in a pressing unit, but he's not the kind of striker who's going to be running about, bringing other people into play by holding it up, that sort of thing.
How many goals do you think he will score for Sheffield United this season?
It's difficult to say with how much I'm expecting him to start. I would look for 10 to 15. I think he's the level of player that could bring that. If there's injuries, if he's not starting games in a row, you might be looking at something like 5 to 10. But I'd be surprised if he doesn't have a good season. I think I'm really confident that that's coming up for him.
That's encouraging, because a player who's never got into double figures, you're thinking he could now, perhaps with the players he'll have around him. That might be why you're thinking that. Yeah,
very much so. Like I say, it's been a bit of a sort of graveyard for strikers at Stoke for the past, nearly the past decade at this point. So having that space where you've got much more creativity, much more time on the ball, presumably you're going to be dominating possession in a lot of games this season. I think it could really bring the best out of him. I'm sure this will be clipped up in 12 months' time and thrown back at me when he's got 3 and 40 or whatever it is, but
we'll see.
I'm optimistic that that's what he could bring.
All right, I'll give you something else we can clip up. Where are Stoke City finishing?
Oh, well, I mean, after yesterday, I'm kind of on a bit of a buzz, so I could go as high as 10th, I think, today.
As high as 10th, so not making the playoffs. How disappointing.
No, I think there's still some building to do. I think there's still some work to do on the squad to get all the way up to challenging for the playoffs. But hopefully we can bring some of the form from yesterday's game against Coventry into the season and carry on and go for top half.
Well, George from Potterlytics, and your dog, what's your dog's name?
My dog's name is Bert. He's staring at me at the minute, wanting to go out. So,
Bert, well, we'll let you take Bert out. Thanks to both of you. Really appreciate your time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, mate.